Before we move to the first session, I would like to acknowledge the great role that Ambassador Denny Carmen played in actually bringing the two institutions and the two countries together. And I think it will be in the fitness of things that I request Ambassador Denny Carmen to say a few words at this juncture when we are starting this significant collaboration between our two institutions. So I'll request Ambassador Denny Carmen if he could just like to say a few words before we move to the working sessions of this particular conference.
Thank you very much. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. It's a great pleasure, and I thank you very much for the opportunity to say a couple of words. I must say that during 4 years, I had a 24/7 living and breathing and dreaming and thinking about India and Israel relations and how do we take them to new heights. 2014 saw a big change in the ongoing relationship that we had in any case, but they were developed and developed furthermore. And we are continuing to see and to witness nowadays the further expansion of the relations. When, as a diplomat, I was looking at the menu, when we were looking at the menu of what those relations mean, we try to do a mix of the traditional and the innovative. And any of the ingredients that were mentioned before, and of course, cybersecurity and its relationship to the challenges that we all have, put cyber in a very high priority. And I'm so glad that both on the governmental side and on the non-governmental side, this very important and crucial issue is on the agenda. And I'd like to congratulate both ICT and India Foundation for having this conference. And I wish you a very interesting one. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Carmen. I think we'll now proceed for the first working session, which is on big data and artificial intelligence, security challenges and opportunities. Before we start the working session, I'll just request all of you to kindly settle down and Soumya to take over from here. And we're just waiting for the chair for this particular session, Dr. Gulshan Rai, to log in. He's about to log in. I think we finished this session about 5 minutes early. So we'll just take about 5 minutes short break for you to stretch, and we start at in 5 minutes time with the first session.
Good morning, this is Dr. Gulshan. I have already logged in. I have heard all these speeches.
Oh, sorry, Dr. Roy. We just...
No. I saw my friend Dani on the screen. It's a great pleasure to see him. I don't know whether he continues to be there or not, but if you are able to communicate with him, convey my regards to him. That I remember him a lot.
Well, we'll just move to first session, which is big data and artificial intelligence, security challenges and opportunities. And to conduct this session, we have Dr. Gulshan Rai. He was the first national cybersecurity coordinator for the Office of the Prime Minister of India. In fact, this particular post was created with his presence. And I think as far as this country is concerned, he has been one of the significant person to have actually highlighted the importance of cybersecurity. And he's authored India's first cybersecurity policy. He has held numerous posts in the government, and he has added negotiations for bilateral and multilateral agreements with more than 10 G20 countries. So without wasting much time, I'll request Dr. Gulshan Rai to take over from here. And he has 4 speakers. He could probably take on from here. Over to Dr. Gulshan Rai.
Thank you, Captain Bansal. Thank you very much. I would like to start the session by thanking India Foundation and ICT IDC for giving me opportunity to come on the scenario, share dice with the distinguished panelists and distinguished participants. More than that, I feel very happy to connect again with Ambassador Dani and His Excellency, the Ambassador of Israel, Mr. Ron Malka. I can tell you that it was the Ambassador Dani who was continuously pursuing with me the cyber dialogue for the cyber relationship between the two countries. As a result of his efforts, great efforts there, I signed that agreement, the first cyber agreement with Israel in 2018, and I had the opportunity to lead the delegation to Israel, to Tel Aviv, to start discussion, cooperation, collaboration with Israel. I know Mr. Una also, and it's really a pleasure, and I'm so grateful to India Foundation and ICT-IDC to invite me once again to on this cyber dialogue. Friends, good morning to all of you, and with the formal kind of a thanks there, and I would like to start the session. Distinguished panelists, distinguished participants, good morning to all of you. Today's session, the first session, is on the AI and the big data. As has been said on the during the initial launch of this seminar, the emerging technologies like AI, artificial intelligence, and big data has a multi-edge role in terms of our on every aspects of the life, whether it's a technology, social, security, surveillance, or the defense. Everything, there is a lot of application, lot of role it is. In fact, it is impacting every sector in a way that we cannot imagine. We have been trying to see the AI evolving in a much different fashion for the last 25 years. But today is a day, whether we realize or we don't realize it, AI and big data are built into our day-to-day application, morning to evening, whatever we do, somewhere we are touching AI and big data in one or the other form. Friends, as I said, AI and big data has a multi-edge kind of a role. The security aspect has already been highlighted by our different speakers. In terms of security also, it has a different applications there. The AI and data can help you to manage your cyber security, can also create a breaches in your cyber security by giving information, continuously monitoring your operations and giving information to the hacker and design his policy. So if any point of a time something goes wrong with the AI engine, you can imagine what can go wrong with your entire system. It can play havoc with the system. Now look at the internal security. So much data is flowing on the internet. Today, unlike the past about 15 years ago, 20 years ago, when the lot of data used to be with the government, today's situation is reversed. The lot of data is with the private sector and individual. The entire data flows on the network, on the internet. The agency, the surveillance agencies, security agencies, police agencies, they also need to analyze the data. They cannot analyze the data, terabits of the data, petabytes of the data, exabyte of the data, which is flowing, which is coming up, can be analyzed by using such tools, AI and big data. Until they do such tools, it's very difficult to come out with a good security, good kind of a safety to the citizen there. Similarly, we can see in all the applications, whether research and development or any other application you see, AI and big data has its own role there. So this is a very important topic, and I really am grateful that the organizers have kept this first session on the subject, because it has the potential, rather I would say that it is driving the entire sector, technology sector. These two technology will drive the sector. Yeah. Today, friends, we have 4 speakers and very renowned speaker. I don't think we could have a better speaker panel for this session. Professor Boaz Ganor, the founder and executive director, ICT IDC. We have the second panelist, Ms. Shivangi Nadkarni. She is the co-founder and CEO of Arrka Consulting. Ms. Jennifer Woodard, co-founder and CEO of Insikt Intelligence, Wing Commander, as Sudhakaran, Synthetic Intelligence and Deep Learning Specialist there. If I'm allowed to give the background of our 4th speaker, Professor Boaz Ganor is the founder and executive director of the International Institute for Counter-Terrorism and the Ronald S. Lauder Chair for Counter-Terrorism at the Interdisciplinary Center, Herzliya, Israel. He previously served 5 years as a dean and 10 years as a deputy dean of Lauder School of Government, Diplomacy and Strategy at IDC Herzliya. Professor Ganor is internationally renowned terrorism scholar who has published numerous books and articles. Ms. Shivangi Nadkarni is the co-founder and CEO of Arrka Consulting. She has over 24 years of experience in the domains of information security and risk management, e-commerce, and networking across multiple geographies. She was also instrumental in setting up the first licensed certifying authority in India. I know her personally. More I say is lesser. Ms. Jennifer Woodard is an entrepreneur and a global technology marketing expert. She is the CEO and founding partner of Insikt Intelligence, and Barcelona-based artificial intelligence startup specialized in automated detection of criminal content. The organization with which she's associated uses proprietary AI methods to detect criminal content in real time from a variety of digital sources, including social media. The next panelist, Wing Commander S. Sudhakaran, is the co-founder and CEO of QuGates Technologies. He was commissioned in the Indian Air Force in the year 1999 and is trained in guided weapon surface-to-air missile. He has architected multiple designs for the Indian Air Force in his long, illustrious career spanning over 2 decades. He's an expert in the field of AI, blockchain, cryptography, and the cyber security. Friends, the panelists have selected the the organizers selected the 4 panelists in a very, very balanced way. Each of them, as I have read out their data, brings a different experience, long-standing experience in the technology. But I'm sure we will enjoy this session. And the last I can say that this is the area which is going to make big impact into every sector. Security is going to be impacted impacted to a large extent, good or bad, both also there. So I invite my first panelist, Professor Boaz Ganor, to present his views. Professor Boaz Ganor.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gulshan. I hope that I won't have interruption with the internet connection, because unfortunately I just did, but now everything seems to be okay. So first of all, thank you for agreeing to lead this distinguished first panel. I heard a lot from our previous ambassador to India, Mr. Carmen, who's with us. I heard a lot about your important activity, your fruitful involvement in building the bilateral cooperation on cyber security and cyber affairs between Israel and India as the coordinator for cyber issues at the Indian NSC. So in the name of Israel and in the name of ICT, I thank you for that important contribution. The subject matter that was set to our discussion today is big data, artificial intelligence, security challenges, and opportunities. And I would like to start with the opportunities. And I'm talking, of course, on my field of expertise, which is counterterrorism. And in counterterrorism, big data and artificial intelligence has become crucial and one of the most important pillars within the counterterrorism strategies of Western societies. And I would like to explain why, first of all. Because when we are talking about counterterrorism, intelligence is the most important asset, because without intelligence, you cannot thwart terrorist attack, you cannot prevent terrorist attacks, you cannot even conduct effective counterterrorism activity. You need, first of all, intelligence. And traditionally, intelligence is based on two arms, the HUMINT and COMINT. HUMINT is human intelligence, COMINT is communication intelligence. But the common denominator for HUMINT and COMINT is the fact that you have at least two people that share a secret. They are having a discussion among themselves, and you are intercepting the discussion by the fact that you have an intelligence agent who's telling you what they are saying, or you are wiretapping their phone conversation or computer conversation. And that's the way intelligence was being conducted for generations altogether. But suddenly, traditional terrorism have became more, I would say, challenging by the rise. It's not a new phenomenon, it's an old phenomenon, but much stronger phenomenon that used to be in the past. And I'm talking about the lone wolf, so-called phenomenon, or the individual attacker, the one person who is being radicalized over the exposure to incitement, mainly online incitement, mainly on the internet, and then one day decides to commit a terrorist attack. Now, the problem with contending with lone wolves was the fact that in most cases, they don't share the secret. They don't have a discussion. So if they don't share the secret, if they don't discuss their plans with anybody else, everything starts and ends with the sick mind of one person. Traditional intelligence, i.e. HUMINT and COMINT, is helpless. And that was creating some kind of an intelligence crisis, if you wish, in the recent decade. But this gap of intelligence, this crisis was filled with this new evolving technology based on OSINT, open sources intelligence. And here we are talking again about big data and AI that have been found by Israel and by many other countries as a good substitute for traditional intelligence, especially in contending with the lone wolf phenomenon. And we had a lot of success in the recent years in stopping, preventing, and thwarting lone wolf attacks based on AI and big data altogether. But again, when we are talking about lone wolves, there is another problem that needed to be taken under consideration, and this is the very low radar signature. Because the lone wolf is not just thinking about and planning the attack alone, he also doesn't need a lot of preparation before the attack. Most of the lone wolf's attacks are being conducted by cold weapon, not all of them, but most of them, by a knife, by a sharp object, or maybe even by the car, conducting a ramming attack with their own cars. The perpetrators doesn't need to prepare a lot preparation for that type of attacks. And that is, again, an unfortunate outcome from the point of view of countering terrorism, from the point of view of intelligence, because intelligence need as much time as possible to trace and then to intercept the plans of the attackers. And they need radar signature, which mainly comes out of the preparation stages in organized terrorism, in what we used to refer to as classical terrorism. It doesn't happen in lone wolf attacks altogether. But there is an opportunity here, another opportunity here. In organized terrorism, when I say organized terrorism, I refer to a terrorist attack which is being initiated, planned, prepared, and executed by a terrorist organization or by a terrorist cell of an organization. In those cases, usually the organization is responsible to spread the word. The organization is responsible after the attack to publish the manifesto of the attacker, the video of the attacker, the leaflets and the pictures that has to do. This, of course, is being done after the attack in order not to harm the intention to conduct those attacks. The lone wolf doesn't have this ability, and they need to give a preliminary warning or a preliminary message to their audiences or their perceived audiences before the attack, because nobody will do it after the attack when they will be killed or they will be arrested. And the worst thing that can happen to a terrorist, that the audiences would not know what was his intention. Why did he conduct the attack? Because what's the difference between a terrorist and a criminal activist is the terrorist has a political goal or ideological or religious goal. And without expressing this goal to the public, he's just a criminal. That's the worst thing that can happen to a terrorist. This is why many of those lone wolves, through social networks, via the internet, using internet platforms, are giving their manifestos, their grievances, expressing their grievances before the attack. One of the best examples, by the way, is the Christchurch attack in New Zealand, in which the attacker, Brenton Trent, was publishing his manifesto in a way that it was kept secret until the attack, and then it was spread through A-Chain and other platforms, but also he used GoPro camera in order that the followers and those that will be given the videos afterwards would see his activity and will salute him for this atrocity altogether. So no doubt that AI and big data brings a lot of opportunities for better and much more effective counterterrorism. But I would argue that big data and AI brings with them many concerns that has to do with different aspects. The first aspect, which I will not focus in this talk, is what I call the democratic dilemma in counterterrorism, which is how do you balance efficiency versus liberal democratic values? And like it or not, AI and big data might, not always, but might intrude to the privacy of people, might collect fragile information on people, and might be regarded as a mass surveillance, if you wish. And we saw, by the way, how the counterterrorism technology was leaking into the civilian arena just recently in Israel and maybe other places as well, in which those technologies of AI and big data that was used solely for counterterrorism now is used in order to follow and surveil Israeli civilians in the Corona arena and to see where they are and who are they meeting with, and so on and so forth. But I would like to focus and to conclude my words with another aspect, and this aspect came to me when came to my attention when I read a very interesting article of Henry Kissinger. Henry Kissinger wrote an article not long ago, a few years ago, under the title "How Enlightenment Ends," and he raised few concerns in reference to the rise of big data and especially AI. First of all, he's saying this is a process that is trying to imitate and to replicate the human mind and the human way of thinking, and that's by itself needs to raise some concerns altogether. But furthermore, you let the technology to conduct strategic judgments and which gives them the ability or the capacity to predict the future, which is again has to be managed very carefully. But he's mentioning the area of the main three areas of concerns that he mentioned is the possibility that the technology will deviate, the AI will deviate from the instructions that was given to it based on the machine learning process, and it would bring unintended results. The second problem is that not only its unintended results, human beings would not be able to understand that those are unintended results because they don't have the capacity actually to understand the results, and the technology doesn't explain the results. They just know that those are the results of the technology, and hopefully, probably, they are accurate. And also, he's arguing that this technology doesn't have the ability to consider yet moral considerations, and this is based on disputes between human beings, between cultures, with definitions that people are holding. And that leads me to, by the way, he finished his article by saying everything, all the concerns I raised are even intensified when we are talking about the use of this technology in security and counterterrorism. And I wrote an article following his concept and translating his concerns into the security and counterterrorism arena. And I've said that when we don't agree in the international arena today, and we don't, after so many years, on even the basic concept of what is terrorism, the definition of terrorism, so how can we rely on a judgment of AI and big data on deciding who's a terrorist if we practically don't agree what is terrorism altogether? And not just that, the Israeli Security Agency, which again had a remarkable success in prevention of terrorist attacks, gave some public statements about their success. And they said actually that they prevented hundreds of lone wolf attacks based on this technology. And they also mentioned that they intercepted 2,000 potential. I'm asking the question, excuse me, what is potential terrorists in reference to lone wolves? Potential terrorists in organized terrorism, in a terrorist cell, I understand. After they're being recruited, if you intercept that, that's a potential terrorist. After they're being trained, after they are having all the preparation for the attack, if you do one of the above, that's a potential terrorist. But a potential lone wolf, a person that sometimes the spontaneous lone wolf in the morning, when he gets out of his house, he doesn't know that in the evening he's going to conduct an attack, let alone he didn't prepare anything for that. What is a potential lone wolf? A potential lone wolf is a person who's maybe in his mind is experiencing some radicalization process, but that's not enough in my view. Maybe it's enough for the technology to find him and to intercept him, but this is very dangerous because it doesn't deal with the practicalities of the preparations, just the preparation of the mindset. So once we understand that, I would conclude by saying that the AI and big data technology is developing rapidly, and that nobody should turn a blind eye to the success that these technologies succeed in prevention of terrorism altogether. But the problem is that the technology is far more advanced than the regulation which is needed in order to create the checks and balances to see that there would not be a deviation, there would not be moral problems, cultural problems that has to do with this type of technology. How to do it, I have a few recommendations, but I would leave that maybe to the Q&A session afterward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I now request Ms. Shivangi Nadkarni, co-founder and CEO of Arrka Consulting, to please deliver her address.
Thanks, Soumya. And first of all, thank you to the organizers to invite me. I remember when I first got the invitation, I asked the basic question about, what can somebody like me who from organizational side of things and works with industry have have to really share with such an august audience, and so maybe that's the perspective that is required. I was just listening to, of course, Dr. Gulshan Rai. So good to connect after such a long time, and my Mr. Boaz Ganor as well. And I have some thoughts from my side. Is we were just, if you look at, so there's one aspect that we've always sort of looked at historically in terms of the state and, the defense establishments having access, intelligence having access to a lot of data. What, of course, the internet has done and what AI and big data has in turn done is sort of made all of this suddenly accessible to a far larger audience. It's no longer, mass amounts of data which can come from, we've talked about sensors, we've talked about IoT devices in the note reference to how so much of data is being available and collected. The key part over there is that it is not just being collected by, let's say, authorized, maybe from the government, maybe from other agencies, but it is literally being collected by anybody and everybody, right? So you have, on one hand, you have stuff like IoT devices, sensors, etc. On the other hand, you have almost everybody in the world roaming around with a phone, using the internet, which gives ample opportunities for data to be just collected from almost everybody on the planet, right? So what, and all of this data is being accessed by, I don't know, anybody who has an app has access to a website, and maybe not directly, but even indirectly. We, for example, we at my company Arrka, we run an annual survey of just Indian digital properties, Indian apps and websites, and we just, for privacy, and we just released the report for this year. Some statistics to give you a sort of sense of how much of data is available out there. For example, about 71% apps take access to the exact location of an individual. So, I can understand, let's say, a food delivery app or a, taxi hailing app wanting to know exactly where a person is. But, what about, media? What about, let's say, something which is a musical app? Why do they need to know your precise location? Isn't it okay if you just knew where, let's say, within a square kilometer radius a person is? Or you have, 50% apps have access to the user's contact list. 62% have access to camera, right? Look at the kind of tracking that even goes on websites. You have about, 99% of the websites we studied had, third-party trackers built in, and an average of 22 third-party trackers on an average website. And I'm not talking social media. I'm talking regular organizational websites, right? Now, if this is the kind of access that is available, and therefore this is the kind of data that is available to, any and every organization out there, and this is just a small sample size from India, right? The same thing's happening globally. What are we talking about in terms of, restricting access? Now, all of this gets picked up. So there is, there are two, I would say, two types or categories of people to whom a lot of this data goes out, right? So you have, of course, the entire world of cybercrime and, the bad actors and those elements getting hold of this data. And then there are all legitimate above board businesses who in turn have access to, very intimate data about you and me. And what happens with it? Where does it end up? What does it get used for? Where does it travel to? Which part of the world? Nobody really has a clue. in India, we are yet to get our Data Protection Act. There is no curb on what happens, right? Now think about all this being used for building very detailed tracking, profiling, profiles about each of us. And this obviously is getting discussed so much in the media, but sometimes we even underestimate how much of an intimate knowledge about each of us is available with people. Now, this who is using, on one hand, there is that this kind of data can get, sort of attacked and, even from very secure infrastructures and extracted from there. But then what about data that's available in the open? What is often the term used is hoovering up that information and then being used for purpose. And that brings us to the next part, which is that AI and big data analytics is what is then the core tool or the sets of the tools, or even like use the term weapons, available for anybody in this world to be able to get hold and do whatever they want with that data. It is no longer in the realm of intelligence agencies, nation states, defense, people who are expected to use this responsibility. It is literally available to the guy down the road. So then what are we talking about, midst of all of that? Now, if this can enable and suddenly, or democratize, access to people and their profile and their intimate details, it can be so much of scope for misuse, right? Sorry about that. Now, in this mix, if you throw bad actors, and we have enough evidence to show, this data is then used for eventually going back and using the net to find and recruit people for, terrorist activities. Literally, you can identify and go behind individuals and, influence their opinion, shape their thoughts and ideas, literally on a one-on-one basis. Again, how does it happen? Again, you have, the tools and technologies enabled by AI and big data that enable you to even find the people of the masses, specifically target them, push them, send them content, go on by influencing them and bringing them, certain ideologies and thoughts and cultures, and then be able to influence them, right? This is something that is indeed worrisome, and ways and means to curb it. Obviously, there are, one has to think through, and this is a debate that has been going on for quite some time globally, and that's something which one is trying to figure out how to sort of weave our way through this. One more thought I wanted to leave behind in this connection is that, especially debates in India tend to focus sometimes on, when it comes to privacy, about the cultural aspect, right? So you often hear people saying, oh, privacy is not something that will ever happen in India. We are a country where we tell our intimate life histories to the stranger sitting next to us on the plane or the train. The point is that maybe culturally we'll continue to do that for the next 10 generations. But the point is that it is not about that. It is about the fact that all our data is available for the whole world to do whatever they want, right? And that misuse is what needs to be addressed, or that potential to misuse, I would say. Or the potential to, I wouldn't even use the term misuse, maybe just use it in a manner which is not supposed to be used. And that the dangers that come from there and the risks that come from there, which impact not just the industry, everybody, right? And that's something which is extremely worrisome. So there is this whole dialogue or this mindset change that is ahead of us as a country in India for sure. So some of those were thoughts, and I'd be really interested in knowing what my fellow panelists say, and look forward to an interesting discussion with them as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Shivangi. Thank you very much. Now we have the another panelist, Miss Jennifer Woodard. Miss Jennifer.
Hi, greetings from Barcelona. Thank you, Boaz. Thank you, Stevie. Thank you, everyone, for inviting me today. Pleasure to be here. I was just wondering if I could share my screen. Is that okay? Maybe someone could open up the sharing.
We're just making you the co-host.
Okay, perfect.
Sumya, I think.
How do I make it? You control it. Actually, how do I make it?
I think it is allowed. A share screen option is allowed. You can just look at the bottom green. It is allowed right now.
Yes, it's working. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. 1 second. Okay. Hi, so again, my name is Jennifer Woodard. I'm a co-founder and CEO of Insikt Intelligence, and thank you so much for inviting me today to be here and talk to you a little bit about AI. So today we're going to talk about, as my co-panelists discussed, intelligence challenges and the opportunities afforded by AI. So I'm going to get into some very specific challenges, many of which are related to the challenges faced by law enforcement in terms of detecting content online, and especially those challenges related to language. So just very quickly about who we are. We're an AI startup based in Barcelona. We specifically work with law enforcement agencies and governments to detect basically any sort of criminal content online. We do that in a variety of ways. We have some software tools, we offer training, and we have a proprietary methodology for doing this. So I'm going to speak a little bit to the way we do these things, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have at the end. So the first thing I wanted to say is that detecting radical or criminal content on the internet is really hard. There's reasons why that you can imagine. The internet is vast, it's big. There are multiple real-time sources that we're dealing with that are constantly changing, social media being the most important one. And it's also incredibly dense. So finding traces of what we want to look for is like looking for basically needles in a haystack. So there are many tools that are on the market that are available to governments, to law enforcement agencies, to private companies for finding the type of content that we're looking for. You can see a variety of them here. Some are big names, some are smaller names. Some of them are used for other purposes other than policing, but most of them don't incorporate a lot of artificial intelligence. And the truth is that most of these tools don't really work for the purpose that we're looking for them to do the job that we're looking for them to do. So when we talk about radical content, kind of getting off of what Boaz was talking about, you know, there's a very, I guess, tenuous line when it comes to determining what is radical content. You might have heard about the debates, you know, that were raging in terms of what was Facebook banning, what was Facebook saying was radical content, what is not radical content, and it's up for debate. It's the same as the definition of what terrorism is. What is actual radical content? So if you look at this, and I'll tell you just as a small caveat, some of the examples in the presentation contain offensive language, but that is obviously, that happens a lot because we were just talking about hate speech and radical content. So radical content right here, it's quite obvious. You can see that this is asking for jihadi related funding, it's incitement, this sort of speech. This is anti-Semitic content, quite easy to detect. But then is this radical content? Actually, it is, because this is a game called Clash of Clans in which terrorists are communicating with each other, asking for terrorist funding from users, from radicalized users. So this would be something that would be incredibly hard to detect, and it's not a place where people would normally be looking for radical or terrorist related content. In these examples, if you look at them from a language point of view, would you say that they are radical content? The first line says, France, you reap what you sow. This isolated, does this sound like it's radical content? The second one is, anonymous writes scripts and bots that can report your account to Twitter and get you suspended. You can do the same thing to them using Python. Isolated, it doesn't really sound very dangerous. And then the third one, the epic story of a righteous couple whose love for Allah was greater than the love they shared between themselves. So all of these examples are indeed radical content. So none of these examples actually would have been detected by any sort of AI solution, just because of the complexity involved in detecting content like this. The language is quite flat. The language doesn't have any sort of context. The users probably haven't been identified as being radical users, so it's extremely challenging to detect this type of content. So AI is a solution, but it also faces its own challenges. So why is this so hard? Effectively, we're asking tools to understand human language and human emotion and many times human intent. And in order to do that, even humans have a hard time detecting this, and also detecting threats, and a machine is obviously challenged. But this is hard because, basically language is changing. Not only is it changing on the ground, it's changing very fast on the internet. Here's an example of, internet slang that changed from, basically an activist chant to teen internet slang. You have the changing dynamics of language illustrated here. What was internet language in 2005 and 2016, completely different. You have the challenges of multi-language content. You have the challenges of these little abbreviations, and these are things that are being used online that are not part of data sets or training sets that we basically any of the AI systems use currently. And this is kind of a cute example, but what does IDKLY and TTYL mean? I don't know. Love you. Talk to you later. Okay, I'll ask your sister. There's definitely a generation gap in terms of the way young people speak online and the way older people speak online. And obviously we don't always keep up with the way the internet is changing in terms of languages. Another challenge is that new propaganda, basically from terrorist groups, and using their radicalization efforts, they're tailored more and more towards local communities. So instead of just putting out a blanketed message towards the entire internet, they're targeting local communities and their local languages. And in many cases, kind of with the examples before, they're targeting them with slang, with local lingo. And that's also hard for a huge, you basically have to have a huge AI tool with all of the languages constantly updated to be able to keep up with this. And then there's the challenges of understanding the communities of these, radical or terrorist content spreaders. Who are they and what relationships do they actually have? You can identify them using social networks, but you don't really know, who they are. Basically, they're anonymous. And also you don't know what their relationships are with each other. When we map out a group of users online, it's really hard to tell who is who. and who knows each other online, who are interacting offline, etc. And then the interaction of these users, who's really important. When we look at, for instance, a group of users online that we understand to be quote unquote suspicious or radical, there are lots of people caught up in these networks that are not necessarily of interest to law enforcement. So it's challenging to find who is the actual cluster of users that we would be interested in targeting when we're looking at communities like this. So in terms of solutions, via AI, what we rely on in our company is a mix of different methods. So we use natural language processing, which is basically, teaching computers to understand how humans speak and how they write. SNA, which is social network analysis, means that, we're mapping out the communities, understanding the relationships. We're doing this via AI. And then, of course, machine learning, which everyone seems to be talking about these days. Huge tools that are analyzing massive amounts of data in real time have to rely on machine learning techniques. So, oops, sorry about that. So yes, there are opportunities for AI and intelligence. We want to talk a little bit about today about what those opportunities are. So one of the first opportunities is actually detecting radical content. As you might have guessed, this is kind of where our expertise lies. This is an example of a tweet that went out prior to the Manchester attack a few years ago. And the tweet was written in English and had some threatening content which was not detected. That is not surprising given the challenges that we kind of discussed before. However, you can build a methodology based on a huge data set of similar messages from the past in order to be able to detect this type of content once it's published and avoid potential threats in the future. And we do this via natural language processing. So what we do is we build a massive database of messages that have a similar message, similar way of writing, similar attributes. We build a machine learning model, and then we're able to later tag these messages for threat scores or suspiciousness, let's say, so that they can be reviewed. And this is the good thing about AI is that it's always learning. Machine learning is always learning. So what we're doing is you gather a series of messages, constantly populating the database, and it's always learning and it's always getting better because obviously AI is not perfect. And some of the challenges that we spoke about before in terms of civil liberties and things like that, it's very important that AI tag things the way they should be tagged. Another opportunity is for detecting radical users. That is extremely difficult, especially across a multi-language internet. It's really hard to understand who is actually, let's say, a suspicious user or a threatening user and who isn't. But we would use the same sort of methodology. We would take a database of known suspicious profiles, which we've put together based on our own research. We've tagged, we've annotated. We would put them through our machine learning model, and then we would develop a threat or a suspiciousness score for each of these user profiles, which is highly effective in indicating who is someone of interest for an investigation. Then mapping connections between radical users. You can see in this example that the conversation networks, for instance, across Twitter are huge. They're millions of people talking to each other. It's extremely hard to decipher what's actually going on sometimes in these conversations. The way we do that is through social network analysis, and we are able to visualize. This looks very unusable, this particular graph, but when you zoom in on a graph like this, you're able to see actually nodes, clusters of users who are talking about certain types of topics that could be of interest to investigations. It's highly effective. And then when we map the connections between the radical users, it's interesting also to use the same types of methodologies to understand who the thought leaders are. So you can see the larger bubbles here are basically the people that are leading the conversation. Lots of other users are following behind. Some of them, are interacting with other users who are interacting with other users, but the main ones would be the ones that are identified here. So it's very interesting to know who's actually making impact in terms of spreading radical or terrorist related content. And we would use the same methodologies, natural language processing plus social network analysis. And as we discussed kind of earlier too, the same thing, identifying the suspicious cluster of individuals. We could assemble this data set of individuals, as we said before, and then also pick them out using social network analysis based on the conversations that they're having with each other. And also, we use something called relevance scores to determine who is driving a conversation. And this is kind of similar to what we were talking about before, which was thought leadership. But driving a conversation doesn't necessarily have to be the thought leader. It can be people who are really, really taking the message to the next level, really inciting and really not just amplifying the conversation, but driving people to act. And we use also the same method of social network analysis. And as you know, on social media, hashtags are very, very important across all sorts of social media, especially Instagram and Twitter. Following these hashtags, understanding which of them is the most kind of popular in a community can often get you additional information about suspicious activity, radical activity. So this is something that we absolutely follow. And we try to understand what's influencing which content is influencing in the community. And it's not just about what is most tweeted or what is, most retweeted. It's about the relevance. So we use the same methods as I mentioned before. And this is actually useful for uncovering dangerous content and new persons of interest. So if there are lots of people that are, amplifying a certain hashtag that we know to be problematic, we can begin to kind of look at those users and see if they also could be of interest to us. And in terms of threat prediction, so I think this is a really interesting one. Social media content is vast and it's hard to understand, but if we take all of the things that I kind of spoke about before and put them together and we aggregate them, we can build a model for basically detecting a threat. So obviously this is hard if you are trying to cover the whole internet, but it is not so hard if you're trying to cover, a local area. So we would gather all of those things, user information to the extent that we legally can, obviously. Content, all of the messages, and take all of the different outputs that we have, the threat scores, aggregate them, and be able to try to determine a threat level that could potentially predict and prevent violent attacks. And another very interesting use case here for AI is human behavior modeling. For threat prevention. This is something that we've actually worked with ICT on. Basically, it takes the user content and puts it through a model, which Dr. Ganor has actually developed a theoretical model along 3 dimensions: the radical view, the support of violence, and psychological state. And what we did was we developed that into an AI algorithm in order to kind of detect which of these users who we have kind of identified would be more vulnerable to radical content, have more propensity to spread radical views, and also have more likelihood to commit violent acts. And I think this is very, very important. Obviously, this is something that's it's more research than applicable right now, but it is something that we would love to continue to look at, because if you can detect radical individuals and radical acts much earlier in the process, you have the potential to actually prevent dangerous situations from happening on the ground. And then another AI use would be automated intervention. So this is less for security and more for content management situations. But what an AI system can do is basically say, okay, the first message is someone talking about a headline. The second message is hate speech. And then the third message here is another user saying that this is this is offensive. And then the AI system can actually answer and say, this is not acceptable content, and then this would be flagged, and then a content moderator would be able to go ahead and eliminate this content from whatever forum or social media service that it's published on. So just some conclusions. We've covered a lot in a very short time, and I know it's quite dense. Hopefully, if there's something that's not covered completely, we can talk about it in the Q&A. But the methods I discussed here today, natural language processing methods, machine learning models, deep learning, these are all super important for analyzing message content. Community analysis is done through social network analysis. So that's how we detect links to criminal radical groups or users between each other. And then, there's other behavioral information that we can find, links from the author in some posts, their participation in forums, the content that they publish, to understand more about their user behavior and potentially prevent potential threats. So the outputs from AI, it can alert you to suspicious content, to criminal behavior. We can collect user information to the extent that we legally and ethically can. We can understand information on relationships between users, and we can also alert to trending information or anomalies that can point to a potentially dangerous situation, which is what I was talking about before in terms of threat detection and early prediction of threats. And why is this kind of beneficial to LEAs and government? Investigative tasks can be automated, basically. It's impossible for analysts to perform these types of tasks on massive amounts of data, so the system would do it for them. We can find content that we wouldn't be able to find otherwise. It would go undetected because, for the same reason, we don't have hundreds of thousands of analysts looking at this content every day. And we would gain a better understanding of radical communities and their networks. So we understand who's talking to who is motivating who's dangerous and who's not. And then early warning alerts in order to be more proactive in the face of threats. And one thing I wanted to add that is related to language is that in terms of the context in India, you have a very multilingual society. This poses an additional let's say, challenge to AI. So I'd be interested in hearing if you guys have any, information or background on how that's being handled in the Indian context, which I know is a lot more challenging. So thank you. Any questions? I'll be happy to ask, and here you have my email address should you want to learn more about anything that we've spoken about today. Be happy to talk with you.
You need to unmute yourself. We don't hear you.
Hello, thank you. Thank you, Jennifer. I think we should finish the last panelist, and we then, as Professor in his presentation said, we will open it up for the questions, because I think we'll have a time. These are all very, very important topics, what has been presented there. And I'm sure it will be so many questions also will be there. We have the last speaker, Wing Commander retired Sudhakaran. I have already given his introduction and background. I request Wing Commander to make his presentation.
Thank you, Gulshan sir. It's a pleasure to have been introduced by you. Good morning to one and all, my friends in Israel, and good afternoon, friends in India. Artificial intelligence is the buzzword of our times, and rightly so. A domain which by itself has the capacity to revolutionize not only humanity, but the entire universe. Therefore, it's but obvious that a domain with such prowess be of great interest amongst academicians, technologists, economists, military and political leaders. Therefore, this topic is very relevant, and the questions that are being asked are equally of great importance. Let me quickly advise the audience, since I'm going to share a presentation, Please switch on to the speaker view so that you get the full view, just in case if you are into the gallery view. I have heard the other panel members express their views and perspective, and they are right if we look at the subject from the prism of what they see. But I'm here to present a very alternate view, a view which probably might not be palatable because we just simply don't understand the very nature of intelligence itself, let alone be artificial intelligence. My previous speaker, Jennifer Woodard of Insikt, did cover in detail about the challenges an artificially intelligent system faces in deciphering and understanding the real problems of the world as it is. A perspective which requires a deeper understanding of intelligence is what I intend to cover in this talk, and then try to understand and address the opportunities and the security challenges. Because if we don't understand the basics right, we will probably not be able to arrive at the right conclusions. For getting the right conclusions, we need to ask the right questions. I don't want to sound a killjoy of sorts, but the questions and conclusions may point to a far more devastating consequence and may appear to lead to an existential crisis of sorts, rather than security challenges restricted to nations, the people, and its borders. Let me cut the long story short and take all of you into my world and its perspectives. I'm covering my views in 3 major headings. A brief introduction for aligning the audience to my perspective as to why I'm saying what I'm saying. In this part, I highlight on the very nature of intelligence, its components, and the capabilities of artificial intelligence, what we know of and have today. This is important because the very definition of artificial intelligence is very distorted, and consequently, what has nothing to do with intelligence has been masquerading as one between us. If we don't define a subject correctly, as I told before, the fundamental question that we are trying to find answers for will always be elusive. The right answers will only come from the right questions. Post the introduction, I shall briefly cover the definition and difference between the 2 digital siblings of intelligence. One we know, and the other is hidden in plain sight. But yes, there is a larger group which is actively developing this, and this is where the real threats and the opportunities are going to come from. Once we know what we are dealing with, we can unravel the mystery and address the questions that face us. Lastly, I would then come to the key question that this particular panel is trying to ponder over. Before we get deeper into the subject, we need to understand the relationship between data, information, and intelligence. Just give me a moment. Once we do that, we can then relook the relationship data has with machine learning. If we then compartmentalize the phenomena of intelligence found in human beings and subsequently compare the true nature of digital and natural intelligence, then shall we be able to understand the level of exaggeration that we have placed on AI as it exists and is evolving. This is a pyramid that we must all be able to relate to very easily. This slide depicts the relationship between data, information, knowledge, and wisdom. Most of us can easily relate to this pyramid and may have come across it also. It's intelligence that transforms data into information and information into knowledge, and knowledge finally into wisdom. Without this, data can never transcend to wisdom, and consequently, we can never achieve intelligence from any sort of data whatsoever. Any being which has the ability to exhibit intelligence does so in 3 distinct ways. Intelligence by comparison, intelligence by computation, and intelligence by cognition. Let me quickly explain and make it easy for everyone to understand. Intelligence by comparison is the most elementary and routine form of intelligence exhibited by all organic life forms. Please note that the intelligence is a phenomena observed only amongst organic beings. And this is something that I'm going to refer subsequently, and then we will be able to draw the analogy and the gap between natural intelligence and artificial intelligence. Even animals and plants have the capability to exhibit this form of intelligence. A sniffer dog zeroing down on a criminal based on the smell it sniffs at a crime scene is a classic example of this form of intelligence. In other words, it's a form of intelligence exhibited by retrieving data or experience from the memory. The second type of intelligence is by computation. This is slightly an evolved form of intelligence, and only some special beings are capable of exhibiting this feature. Octopus in the nature has the ability to compute, and various experiments have proven this fact. This form of intelligence requires methods, processes, formula to be applied before arriving at the specified result. The main difference between intelligence by comparison and by computation is that for computation, it is mandatory to have a past memory for some tangible output, while for computation, the input arrives at the output by processing it through some proven methods or process or formulae. But the most important part of intelligence is intelligence by cognition. Cognitive processes use existing knowledge and generate new knowledge. It is a process, it is a mental process and action of acquiring knowledge and understanding through thought, experience, and senses. Cognitive process can work in a zero data and method regime. This kind of intelligence is the rarest of its kind and is observed only in human beings. Even in human beings, it is seldom used, as most of the routine requirements to use phenomena of intelligence are met by the basic frameworks of comparison and computation. Einstein's theory of relativity by using past experience or the Vedic inscriptions of the cosmos are a result of cognitive intelligence. Now, when we look at the aspect of machine learning and its relation with data, or shall I mix the term big data here, we can easily conclude that by virtue of merely employing the method of curve fitting and adjusting the coefficient of the slope of a curve, technologies like machine learning and deep learning, which are the backbone of modern AI frameworks, solve most of the problems which appear to be intelligent. The truth of the matter is, they operate merely in the realm of comparative and computational intelligence. The reason why I use big data instead of data in this is when we speak of intelligence, it always requires a multi-dimensional voluminous data set to arrive at any meaningful conclusion. That is why Jennifer Woodard was referring the complexity of assessing the real meaning of something very casually remarked. It's my belief that when digital intelligence reaches a point wherein it mimics natural intelligence, big data would be irrelevant, as intelligence would need experience to refine and evolve rather than merely confined to the realm of unidirectional data sets as we know of in big data. It is for this reason, that I choose to leave this part of this topic and concentrate purely on the artificial intelligence aspect of the topic. So with this as the background, and when we revisit our journey to wisdom pyramid, we can clearly see that the intelligence by comparison almost operates at all levels till the gateway of wisdom. Good memory may reflect good knowledge, but may not make someone wise. The computational intelligence starts at the upper layers of data all the way to the wisdom room, but not to its pinnacle. It's only cognitive intelligence that operates between the whole of knowledge and the wisdom realms in toto. Why this diagram is of significance is that the importance of cognition in intelligence need to be understood very clearly. Only then we can define the real answers for the opportunities and security challenges that are going to come from the digital intelligence domain. If we now analyze the components of AI, we shall realize that it is nothing more than a framework born out of the marriage between several comparison and computational frameworks. I often come across the artificial intelligence bot Sophia, and as to how intelligent it is. It merely operates in the linguistic framework, which is governed by a grammar, which in turn is a simple set of rules and definitions. To deliver an intelligent response to a given question, multi-sensory input is mandatory. For example, if you ask your Alexa or Hey Google to write a poem for you, it can at the best read out a poem with a similar context. On the other hand, an average human being shall politely acknowledge his or her lack of ability in doing so, or may smartly remix some lines from his memory and present one. In short, let me conclude that intelligence without cognitive abilities is just mechanical. AI as it exists and evolving is therefore just nothing but smart automation. The term intelligence associated with the very phrase AI is itself sometimes misleading and wrong. So does that mean that we need not worry at all? Or is AI all about hype and myth? We need to wait a bit more to find the answers to this. What we see as AI today is mostly branded as narrow AI or limited AI. If we just accept it the way it is, as I've already stated, it as an automation, smart automation technology, rather than being intelligent, then it's full of opportunities in a very limited context. We are already seeing the benefit of this, and of course, it comes with a certain level of risk and challenge in all walks of life. And this has been amply covered by a fellow co-panelists here. The so-called narrow AI is already giving us a plethora of benefits, and it promises a rich set of opportunities also for the future. But that is not what I am here to discuss about. There is another context that I want to present. There is a race between artificial intelligence and synthetic intelligence. Many of you wouldn't have even come across this term, but this term is of vital importance. If we don't understand technologies that are going to hit us in the near future, we are going to be overwhelmed. And that is why it is very important we need to at least understand what we are talking about. So the first question that could come in anyone's mind is, after having my views, hearing my views so far, what's in a name? To find the answer to the question, we need to understand that the term AI was coined at a time when even elementary calculators weren't there. It was in fact coined in the year 1956. And the technology of those times never believed technology would reach this level in just over half a century. In addition, the pursuit of AI was almost abandoned thrice between the 70s and 90s. If we take a closer look at the very term AI, we realize it comprises of two words, artificial and intelligence. Artificial means that which is not real. In fact, true to its name, we do have what is called an unreal intelligence. And if intelligence cannot be or never be unreal, then what are we talking about? Remember, a few minutes ago, I did reiterate on the point that intelligence is a phenomena observed only in organic beings. The aim is to replicate or copy the phenomena in the digital space. And digital space is inorganic or synthetic in nature. So if our real aim is to mimic the phenomena of intelligence with cognitive abilities, then cognitive computing or synthetic intelligence gives a much more purposeful name to it. So by merely changing the name, will it change anything at all? This is another logical question that anyone could ask. The answer to this is very much a resounding yes. To be able to incorporate cognitive abilities in machines, we need to move away from the ways we employ to develop AI frameworks. What we are doing today is a human is creating a holistic framework which by iterative methods of weight tuning eventually ends up solving a very narrow band of problems. And that is not intelligence at all. We need to look at the development of this in an altogether new way. While I'm certainly not the first to propagate this line of thought, and there is enough research which is already being carried out, and I'm of the strong belief that there have been significant breakthroughs that have been achieved, and it has been kept confidential in the interest of achieving supremacy at a later date. A change of name will lead to the correct realization also amongst the practitioners and segregate those who are happy downloading frameworks from GitHubs and customizing to real research and customizing than to the real researchers who are in the pursuit of intelligence, the intelligence alchemists, one of whom I claim to be. In a nutshell, let me put these things in a very broad perspective. What are artificial intelligence and its applications? Artificial intelligence is a supposed intelligence exhibited by machine through a set of theories, methods, and algorithms. As I told you before, all this only belong to the realm of comparative and computational intelligence. Applications include problem solving, game playing, natural language processing, speech recognition, image processing, engineering, automatic programming, and robotics. So what is synthetic intelligence and cognitive computing all about? It refers to the computing that focuses on reasoning and understanding at a higher level in a manner that is analogous to human cognition, rationale, and judgment. Applications include replacement of human beings in areas of speech recognition, sentiment analysis, face detection, risk assessment, and fraud detection. If this technology is to be realized, Jennifer Woodard would never have that complaint that she had, that intelligence today has its own shortcomings. So it's clear that the difference between AI and SI is in the way that they approach, the task. The difference is exactly as that of a sniffer dog was that of a detective or of a cop. So to refresh what we have discussed so far, and then have a bird's eye view of what I've been talking about, we can summarize it as seen in the slide. AI, as it is, cannot cause a challenge to be discussed so seriously. It's a technology like anything else with its own pros and cons. But synthetic intelligence has far-reaching consequences, and that needs to be examined closely, because it may have effects that shall undermine our core existence. I shall discuss this in details in the challenges section of this presentation. As far as the opportunities of artificial general intelligence or artificial superintelligence is concerned, it could be an endless list. But I thought, just to wake up the audience who must have almost gone into a slumber of having heard for so long some repeated terms, I thought, let me take you into the fantasy world of Harry Potter. We will see an unprecedented information revolution in the history of mankind if synthetic intelligence ever were to be a reality. Research and development in every field shall be accelerated at breakneck speeds, unrivaled in our history. We certainly shall enjoy extended life expectancy and may even see immortality of life. We will also see a singular crime-free world, but then it will have its own meaning, which I shall cover in the challenges. The life conditions will be very much optimized. Everyone will have what he or she needs. We may live in a zero poverty regime, and we may be able to colonize other galaxies also. But when we get to challenges, all these turns right on its heads. Security challenges again shall be of two kinds. We have to see the threats from the artificial intelligence or the synthetic intelligence domain in the short term as well as in the long term. Data is the new oil. That's what people say now. Intelligence shall be the new weapon of the future. The one who crosses that line first and develops the first artificial general intelligence or artificial superintelligence, one of the first things we can assure is that it shall prevent anyone else from crossing that Rubicon. And it would be next to impossible task to stop such a system from doing so. We've already seen such an intent from the nuclear domain. The person, corporate, or nation which shall first control such a system may try to factor adequate checks and balances to control the system and thereby enjoy a pole position. We may see a major economic consolidation and monopoly of the agent who is going to control this vital resource. The democratic setup as we see shall collapse in no time, or at least a veiled threat shall ensure a setup mostly like the democracy practiced by communist regimes or by dictators. We may witness a new form of colonialism and digital dictatorship. The entire population may be at an unprecedented level of intrusive surveillance and brain scanning, leading to mass exterminations. We shall see a unipolar, singular world order. The long-term challenges could deal a death knell to mankind itself. It may begin with the augmentation of human capabilities, and a new breed of hybrid humans may rule the world for a short span of time. Artificial superintelligence shall eventually overpower all forms of human beings. Organic life may sustain longer, but human beings could very much be overwhelmed by this new breed of digital species, akin to the fate of Neanderthals and early Homo sapiens that we human beings emerged out of. So the key point that I would like to leave to the jury is, could digital intelligence through SI be the next step towards human evolution? After all, evolution is a continuous process, and it's a constant upgrade to adapt to the situations and the ecosystem. So could there be a possibility of life to exist outside an organic framework? The fundamental composition of both organic and inorganic substances, at the end of the day, are the same elements. The only silver lining that I see is life in some forms shall continue to survive for sure if intelligence indeed is the path for future evolution. Ladies and gentlemen, I have just covered on a very small aspect of this. Coming to as to how it can be done and why it can be done and where it shall be done and who are the people who are likely to cross it, it's a matter to be discussed for another day. But today I'll take your leave, and any of your questions I'll be more than happy to answer. Thank you one and all for having given me this opportunity, and I am now ready for the Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you, Wing Commander Sudhakaran, for such a illuminating and very deep-rooted presentation. I will summarize and the issues which all of the four panelists have said it, I will certainly summarize and for the seminar. But before we do that, we have 10 minutes, and we can entertain 4 questions maximum. And I request participants and delegates, if they have a question, or if someone from the India Foundation organizers can read the question if it has been sent on a chat box, and if it is addressed to any particular panelist, it can be addressed to him or her, or otherwise we will request any of the panelists to answer those questions. Maximum 4 questions. So I request the India Foundation to seek the questions and put before the panelist.
We have requested the participants to raise hand in case they wish to ask questions. I can see already one hand is raised. We can see 2 hands right now. Apurva Mishra and Kedar Kulkarni. So you may ask them to ask their questions, and then they could probably ask.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. So approve. Please raise, say your question, and if you have any identification for any panelist, please say so.
Yeah, thank you, sir. My name is Apurva Mishra. I'm a senior research fellow at India Foundation. I just wanted to congratulate Jennifer for an extraordinary presentation. I found it very, very helpful. My question was to you, Jennifer. Based on your research so far, do you have a tentative or a rough timeline for when does a new user who's been exposed to extremist ideologies eventually end up taking action or become, commit crimes in real life? Is there like a tentative timeline that you can share with us? Is it a 1-year timeline, 18 months? I know this will change because, you know, depending on the level of extremism they've been bombarded with and their personal
Yes.
you know, behavior. But is there a rough timeline you?
Thank you for the question. Thank you for the compliment on the presentation. I appreciate it. I actually think that this is a question more for Professor Ganor, because it's less about the timeline in terms of the research that we've done on specific users and more about the timeline that it takes for a person to be radicalized in any scenario. So I don't know, Boaz, could you speak a little bit to this?
Can you repeat, approve the question, please?
Yes, so my question was that from the time that a new user is exposed to extremist content online, is there a rough or a tentative timeline before which he ends up taking action in real life based on exposure to this extremist ideology? I know it's very complicated, depends on person to person, but roughly do you know what time window do security agencies have to prevent this person from taking actions in real life?
Actually, it's varied. It could take months and years, and we know of cases of 24 hours. In which 24 hours in which a person was exposed to this material and then made a decision. He was not radicalized as far as we know before, and he made a decision to do something as an outcome of the immediate exposure. We usually differ between the ongoing long process of radicalization and triggers. And the triggers are short term. So a trigger could be something that immediately erupt the feeling of the need, an urgent need to do something about it. Sometimes the trigger is based on an ongoing radicalization, but in few extreme cases, it could be a standalone trigger, and that could be a very short term process.
Thank you.
Professor, if you permit me, I just add to what you have said for our friend there. Professor, if you permit me to, I can add whatever you have said.
Please do.
Approve, I think, I mean, what Professor has said is very right, but the first premise is the time of action depends upon the quality of trigger, quality of data to be analyzed, and quality of data to be collected. Nowadays, more than 85% of the traffic moving on the net, and after you get a 5G communication, next generation communication, you are going to deal with another technology, which is the 5G, next generation communication technology. So when at the time of collection of data, you are not dealing with one technology, you are dealing with the convergence of technologies there. It depends upon the interpretation of those technologies, transferring the trigger into the real data. That is a great challenge, and that's what I think any agencies world over, including the Israeli agency, will struggle, because there is a great rush and race also there. On one side, the technologies is innovating to a very high speed, but the solution to the technology, to address the technology, is a great challenge there. So I think your question is valid, but what Professor has said is given the right answer, correct answer. As the time goes on, the challenge is going to increase more. I don't know whether Professor agrees or not agree, but it's going to be more and more challenge there, more and more challenge. And you can see, you just keep the complexity which Sudhakaran highlighted, with that in mind. That complexity is going to be very, very complex in time to come. So Kedar, can we have your question?
Yes, thank you so much to all the esteemed panelists for such an elaborate and wonderful discussion. My question is regarding the point which Professor Boaz had made regarding the balance between AI extraction versus the privacy. And I think that is where the entire world today is worried about. So can there be any international standards set and cooperation between countries so as to set a defined set of principles for balancing the two?
Professor, it's your question.
Okay. Well, you're asking the wrong person because I'm always optimistic, and I tend to believe that the answer is positive. But I was also optimistic for the last 30 years that at the end of the day, we will agree on one definition of what is terrorism, and still we didn't reach that goal. I still didn't lose my optimism on that matter as well. So going back to your question, Kedar, I think it's a must. But first and foremost, we need to prepare the internal guidelines because it's still yet to be discussed internally between technological expert, internet expert like the people we have here, together with scholars, together with philosophers, together with jurists and others, to set the right checks and balances and the right guidelines which are needed. I can suggest a few rules like that can be cooperated within a guideline like that. But only after we will have these internal discussions and we will have the internal check and balances. When I say internal, I refer to each state by itself. Then we can compare notes and maybe get some kind of an international threshold. But if you ask me, is it needed? It desperately needed. Is it possible? I tend to believe that the answer is yes.
Thank you, Professor Ganor. Now, any more questions?
Yeah, there is one more hand, sir. We have some Chandraveer Singh Bhatti.
Chandraveer Singh Bhatti, yes. Chandraveer, you can ask the question.
Thank you, sir, for allowing me. Yeah, thank you, sir. My question to Wing Commander Sudhakaran, and my simple question is that, sir, what are the problem and opportunities you see in the developing of artificial superintelligence in India? Thank you, sir.
Wing Commander Sudhakaran, are you hearing?
Wing Commander Sudhakaran.
I
Maybe
think
you can
he
repeat
is.
the question.
He is not mute. He's
Not mute, but I think
he is not mute. His video is on.
okay, he's saying that I cannot getting the audio. Can the question be typed? He has just sent a message. So what was the question, Chandraveer? Could you type the message for him on the chat box?
Yes, sir, I can type. I will type, sir. Okay, sir.
Can you please type it on my chat screen so that I can answer it? I'm not able to hear getting the audio.
Sir, chat is disabled.
Okay.
I think
the question. I'll type the question if required. Yeah.
Okay, sir. My simple question is that to Wing Commander Sudhakaran is that what are the problem and opportunities he sees in the development of artificial superintelligence in India?
What are the problems and opportunities he visualizes in development of artificial superintelligence in India?
My
Yes, sir,
God,
thank you.
we are talking about artificial intelligence. Sudhakaran is talking about artificial intelligence, and this guy has gone to super artificial intelligence. Fantastic.
Yeah, I have typed the question. It should reach you. Yeah. Artificial superintelligence. Yeah.
Okay, I got the question. The question is, what are the problems and opportunities visualized in developing artificial intelligence in India? See, the problem is the original thought process in this country is still not taken off. When we talk about artificial general intelligence or artificial superintelligence per se, there is absolutely next to zero work that is happening. Most of the people who claim about working in artificial intelligence are generally talking about the open source frameworks and recustomizing them, and they are using it. That does give different kinds of outputs for different scenarios, and we may appear to be, thinking that we are doing a lot, but these are pure analytics, computational, and comparative in nature. What requires to be done for true development of a digital intelligence framework is we need to mimic what nature has, the way that nature has evolved intelligence. This work is done in Europe, this work is done in MIT, this work is going on in the US, not in India. Couple of years back, I took a complete printout of the PhD thesis that is being carried out in this country. Not a single work is done in this direction. We are doing all over. But this core area, we are somehow found wanting. Now, this is actually a big problem of sorts. Why? If ever this kind of, because we have to understand the very nature of intelligence itself. Intelligence is independent and free. It will not be under anybody's control if it is truly intelligent. If it is truly intelligent. Now, we are not investing ourselves in that kind of a framework. We are trying to do a holistic thing developed out of our mind, which can never be true intelligence. So, if the country doesn't know, then what do we talk about the constraints? It is full of constraints, because a couple of years back, the Ministry of Defense did bring out a task force for artificial intelligence. But what is artificial intelligence? Which area to develop in? It was almost left for everybody else guess. And 2 years down the line, still we are where we are. So we have a mountain to climb. We have a lot of catching up to do. And yes, we have the talent here. That much I can assure you, because I've visited all the IITs, all the PSUs. There is a talent there. But we need to recognize this and encourage this in a very big way. Thank you.
Thank you, Wing Commander Sudhakaran. If you don't mind, I would like to say something which is slightly contrary to what you have said it. I certainly would like to put forward the point of view. We need a basic 4 parameters, a raw material for the AI, and which I wanted to put in my summary also. The 4 parameters are the data, the software algorithm, the manpower, as well as the demand there. And Wing Commander Sudhakaran has already said that we had abandoned these 4 parameters. We are one of those countries, apart from China and America, we have that 4 basic parameters. There is a great, immense potential of AI, and we have the capability also to do that. The government has taken certain steps, which Wing Commander is slightly not, maybe may not be updated, but a lot of steps have been taken to create the research and development tools in the strategic aspect of the AI. Those programs are running there, and I think we have been quite. We started our program about 20-25 years ago, and a lot of work has taken place. In the meantime, innovation is taking place so fast that you need to keep track of it. Somewhere, some lag must be there, but the government is putting a lot of stress, a lot of emphasis, a lot of funding has been done. In the last budget, we have allocated a huge amount of the fund for the AI itself there, and the emphasis was laid down by the Honorable Prime Minister during his last Independence Day speech there. So there a lot of efforts has been done, but this area itself is a very innovative, and more need to be done. More collaboration need to be done there. Thank you, Professor Wing Commander Sudhakaran, and thanks very much, friends, delegates, and participants. We have a very, very important session there, and if we look to see the session aspect, every panelist has highlighted one single point is this technology has a strategic implication, whether we talk about the counter-terrorism, whether we talk about the surveillance intelligence, whether we talk about the privacy and security, or we talk about other social development sector, maybe including the health sector. We have been, reading the examples, rich examples of the cancer, AI being used for the cancer and health discipline there. We have been hearing many examples of that. It has a strategic implication there and strategy aspect there. It gives you a lot of advantage. It gives you little fear, frightening also. As I said in the opening, the discussion there, I opened the panel, that it can be your friend, it can become enemy. The world over, everyone now highlights the importance of bringing certain control on the AI algorithm because of its strategic application there. No country can say that they will be self-sufficient. Americans have come out with a very, very sophisticated development in the AI. Chinese have a special program, AI development, to counter the American. Just because they have the data, they are also participating. Huge funding has been earmarked by the China there. So world over, everyone is going about it. As Professor Ganor has said in the opening panel there, do we need certain controls to bring in? Would any country is interested to bring in? There are a lot of developments are taking place. And if I highlight there, the United Nations group of government experts, particularly on bringing the norms of behavior in cyberspace, has been in place for right from 2001. And the current the 2019 panel is going on now, and the discussions are going on currently now. We have not even reached the basic norms. There is a separate AI for the weapons, there AI group on the weapons. There are 6 countries we have formed to create a kind of a ethics, how to use the AI technology, AI algorithm. We are still far away. This technology, as Wing Commander Sudhakaran has said it, is much more complicated in terms of diplomatic discussion, negotiation, strategy negotiation. Then we have seen the nuclear. We could reach it because innovations were not taking place here. Here the innovations are taking place much faster. Every country wants to have a superior control, want to have a control. Whosoever will have a good technology, they will have a better control. They will be leader in the future, and they will lead the social development, whether they will lead the strategic kind of a development. They will be a leader in the defense technology as well as in all aspects of the nation development. So, friend, this is a very, very important discussion. Now, the most important aspect which I want to highlight is that the India and Israel, they are friends. We have a lot of trade among each other in terms of technology, in terms of defense, in terms of all aspects. Some of the names Jennifer mentioned in her presentation in one of the slides there. Should India Foundation and our friend ICT Herzliya should take initiative in terms of a informal dialogue to first of all involve a principle of ethics while using the artificial intelligence, and then work together maybe to bring about certain other norms in terms of control, in terms of regulation, which can be taken up to the entire wider scenario, or the G77, G20, or UNGG. It can be done that. There is a good potential because we enjoy a good relation, we enjoy the technological, a lot of aspects. A lot of startup in India and Israel are working in this area, and there are investment which at some end they meet together also there. With this comments, I would like to thank all the panelists for making such a enlightening presentation. Each one of them has made a good enlightening presentation. I would like to thank India Foundation and the ICT IDC Herzliya.